What happens when a successful CEO decides to go undercover in his own company? Robert Harris, the CEO of a thriving retail empire, wants to uncover the truth about his store's customer service after hearing disturbing complaints about biased treatment. Disguised in a hoodie and jeans, he steps into one of his stores, blending in as just another customer. What he finds is shocking: employees dismissing customers based on their appearance, a blatant disregard for the company's core values, and a culture where indifference thrives. But the most shocking discovery comes when Robert overhears two employees making racially biased comments about a customer. Unbeknownst to them, it's the CEO himself. Struggling with what to do next, Robert confronts the store manager and dives into an intense journey of accountability and change. Will Robert succeed in restoring his company's integrity, or will it all crumble under the weight of its own toxic culture? Stick with us to see how the story unfolds, and make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your thoughts in the comments below. In the heart of downtown Chicago, Robert Harris, the CEO of a thriving tech company, decided to take an unconventional step to reconnect with his employees and understand the true dynamics of his business. Robert had built his company from the ground up, turning it into a highly successful enterprise with hundreds of employees across the nation. However, over the past few years, complaints had started to surface about employee behavior and customer service, particularly in some of the newer branches. Fed up with relying solely on reports and the observations of senior management, Robert decided to go undercover in one of his company's branches to get an unfiltered view of what was happening on the ground. For this mission, he swapped his usual executive suits for a simple hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap, blending in with everyday shoppers. The goal was simple: to observe how the store staff interacted with customers, and to see if the values he had worked so hard to instill in his company were still alive. He arrived at the store early on a Saturday morning, just before it opened, with a mixture of excitement and nervousness in his stomach. The store, located in a bustling neighborhood of Chicago, was not one of the top-performing locations, but it held sentimental value to Robert as it was one of the first stores he had opened outside his home state. As he walked through the automatic doors, Robert felt a sense of pride. This was his creation. But as he entered, that pride quickly gave way to unease as he began to pay close attention to the interactions happening around him. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Employees were busy restocking shelves, assisting customers, and working efficiently. But Robert was looking for more than just the surface-level activity. As he moved through the aisles, he observed a young man working in the electronics section, who seemed distracted and detached. Robert picked up a pair of headphones and stood in front of the counter, hoping the employee would offer assistance. But after several minutes, the employee barely glanced up, his attention fixed on his phone. Robert felt a growing discomfort in his stomach. This was not the level of customer service he had envisioned when he started the company. Frustrated, Robert moved on, hoping it was just an isolated incident. However, he soon noticed a pattern. A middle-aged woman, clearly looking for assistance in the home goods section, was ignored for several minutes before another employee, a younger woman, finally approached her with a smile and offered help. This contrast in customer service made Robert uneasy. He had worked hard to build a company where every customer felt valued, regardless of their background or appearance, but here, the attitude toward service seemed inconsistent and biased. The tipping point came when Robert overheard a conversation between two employees near the kitchen section. One of them made a comment about a customer in the store, saying, "That guy over there, he's probably just browsing. People like him never buy anything." The word stung. Robert, who had been observing from a distance, realized that the employees were making assumptions based on a person's appearance. They didn't know who he was, but that didn't matter, they had already judged him. Realizing that what he was witnessing was more than just a few bad apples, Robert made the difficult decision to confront the issue head-on. He walked to the customer service desk, asked to speak with the store manager, and revealed his identity. The manager, a middle-aged man named Brian, was shocked to learn that the CEO of the company had been undercover in his store. Robert explained the issues he had observed, the lack of respect and professionalism, and made it clear that these behaviors were unacceptable. He called for a meeting with all the staff, where he revealed his identity and explained that the company's culture needed to be re-evaluated and restored to its core values of respect and inclusivity. In the end, Robert's undercover mission wasn't just about catching employees in the act, it was about starting a conversation on how to improve and rebuild the culture within his company. He knew that this experience would be the first of many steps toward real change, and he left the store that day with a renewed sense of purpose, to ensure that every customer, regardless of their background, would always feel respected and valued. After the tense confrontation with the store manager, Brian, Robert took a deep breath and gathered his thoughts. He knew the real work was just beginning. Walking through the store earlier, he had witnessed moments that were troubling, but now, he had to turn his attention to the bigger picture. The way customers were treated wasn't just an issue of a few employees failing to do their jobs, it was about the broader company culture that had allowed these attitudes to persist. It was clear to Robert that something had gone wrong over the years. His company, which had once been founded on the principles of respect, inclusivity, and customer care, was slowly losing its soul. The following Monday, Robert arranged for an emergency meeting with the entire company's leadership team. He needed to hear from them directly, to understand where things had gone wrong. The leadership team, comprised of seasoned executives, was understandably taken aback by the revelations Robert had shared. They hadn't realized how deep the issue had gone. While they had heard the occasional complaint, they hadn't connected the dots that the problem was so widespread. Robert sat at the head of the table, his expression serious but calm. "I've been running this company for over 20 years, Robert began, his voice firm. And I built it on the idea that every customer, no matter who they are or where they come from, deserves to be treated with respect. But what I saw last week doesn't align with that vision. We're failing our customers, and in turn, we're failing ourselves." He paused, letting his words sink in. He then outlined the plan for moving forward, starting with company-wide training on bias, customer service, and empathy. It wasn't enough to tell employees how to treat customers, it was essential that they understood why these actions mattered. The training would be mandatory, and it wouldn't just focus on the basics of good service. It would also include deep dives into the importance of respect, valuing diversity, and recognizing unconscious bias. Robert knew that if they were going to fix the issues, it had to start with changing the mindset of every employee, from the top down. As the weeks went by, Robert visited more stores across the country, incognito once again, to see if the changes were taking effect. He saw glimpses of improvement, but he also observed that old habits died hard. Some employees were still indifferent, still letting their biases show, and Robert knew that the work was far from over. However, he remained committed to the process. He held meetings with store managers to remind them of the importance of upholding the company's values, and he encouraged open, honest conversations between the staff and the leadership team. One day, Robert visited another store in Los Angeles. This time, the interactions were far more positive. Employees greeted him with warmth, answered questions, and engaged with customers in a friendly, professional manner. Robert was cautiously optimistic. While there was still a long road ahead, the progress was tangible. This wasn't about fixing a single store or putting a band-aid on a few bad incidents. It was about ensuring that every person who walked into a store felt respected, valued, and welcome, no matter who they were. As Robert drove back to his office after his visit, he reflected on how far the company had come, but also on how much further there was to go. The change wouldn't be easy, but he felt reassured that with the right leadership, the company could return to its roots. It would take time, dedication, and continuous effort. But in the end, Robert knew that by facing the hard truths and making the necessary changes, he could restore the company to the vision he had always had for it, one where respect and kindness weren't just values on paper, but lived out in every interaction. As Robert continued his undercover visits, the sense of urgency to fix the deep-rooted problems within his company only grew stronger. He had seen firsthand the dismissive attitudes some employees held toward customers, and it was clear that these weren't just isolated incidents. The culture of indifference and bias seemed to be woven into the fabric of certain stores, and this realization weighed heavily on Robert. He couldn't afford to let this slide, and he knew the leadership team needed to take full accountability for the shift in the company's culture. After his visits to several locations, Robert sat down with his trusted leadership team to address the ongoing issues. The meetings became a regular occurrence as they began working toward a more comprehensive strategy for reform. They knew that mere training wasn't enough. It was about changing mindsets and creating an environment where employees could feel safe enough to speak up, where biases could be challenged, and where mutual respect would be a fundamental part of the work culture. Robert couldn't let his company become just another business driven solely by profit and performance. It had to stand for something more. The leadership team was tasked with reworking the company's policies to ensure that inclusivity and fairness were at the core of every interaction, both with customers and among employees. Robert made it clear that this would require complete transparency. Managers were instructed to have regular check-ins with their teams to discuss how things were progressing and to identify potential issues before they festered. To further demonstrate his commitment, Robert announced that he would be visiting each store unannounced, not just as a customer, but to interact directly with employees and customers to ensure the changes were taking root. One afternoon, while visiting a store in Atlanta, Robert witnessed a moment that made his heart swell with pride. As he wandered through the aisles, an elderly woman was struggling to reach a shelf of high-end kitchenware. A young employee immediately noticed her frustration and rushed over to offer assistance. The employee, a young man in his mid-20s, didn't just help the woman with her item, he took the time to ask if she needed help carrying it to her cart, showing genuine care and patience. Robert observed the interaction from a distance, feeling a sense of relief. This was what he had always envisioned customers treated with respect, no matter their age, race, or background. It was a small but significant victory for the company. However, Robert knew that this moment of progress wasn't the end of the journey. He had to remain vigilant. He continued to visit stores across the country, paying attention to how employees interacted with customers and how the company's values were being reinforced at all levels. In one particular store in Boston, Robert encountered a familiar problem. A young cashier was rude to a customer who had asked for help locating a product. The customer was a woman of color, and the interaction was curt and dismissive. The employee's behavior immediately reminded Robert of the challenges they still faced. Robert didn't confront the cashier right away. Instead, he observed quietly, making a mental note of the situation. After the customer left, Robert made his way to the back office, where the store manager, Lisa, was overseeing inventory. "Lisa," Robert began, his voice calm but firm, "I saw what happened with the cashier at the front. That's not the behavior we've been working to instill. We have to make sure that doesn't happen again." Lisa, who had been a long-time employee and manager, looked visibly shaken. She nodded, agreeing that the behavior was unacceptable, but she also acknowledged that it had become a problem within the store. "Lisa, this is why we're doing this," Robert continued. "We can't afford to ignore the subtle biases or the dismissiveness that's happening. This is where the work begins, and we're all responsible for it." He spent the next hour with Lisa, discussing the steps she could take to prevent such behavior in the future, including additional training and clear consequences for such actions. As Robert walked out of the store that day, he felt a renewed sense of determination. While there was still much to do, he was beginning to see glimpses of real change. His company's culture, one that he had worked so hard to build, was beginning to shift. The road ahead would be long, but Robert was no longer walking it alone. He had the commitment of his leadership team and the support of employees like the young man in Atlanta who had shown what good customer service looked like. This was just the beginning of a new chapter for the company, and Robert was ready to lead it. As the months went by, Robert remained committed to the process of revitalizing his company's culture. While he had seen small wins and positive changes, he knew that lasting transformation would require constant attention and sustained effort. It was no longer just about visiting stores undercover and pointing out individual instances of poor behavior. It was about creating a comprehensive, ongoing commitment to respect, fairness, and inclusivity across the entire organization. The changes had to be embedded into every corner of the company's operations. Robert continued his undercover visits, using them not only to monitor progress but also to get honest feedback from employees on the ground. He realized that many of them, especially the newer staff, still lacked the tools to effectively handle sensitive situations or address biases when they surfaced. To tackle this, Robert worked closely with the Human Resources Department to develop a more robust training program that went beyond just recognizing bias. It included practical strategies for confronting it in real time. In one of his visits to a store in Phoenix, Robert encountered a situation that reinforced the importance of this kind of training. A customer, a black woman, was asking a young cashier for assistance in locating an item. The cashier, who was still relatively new, hesitated and appeared unsure of how to respond. Robert watched as the cashier, instead of offering help, pointed the customer toward another employee without taking any initiative to assist. The woman, clearly frustrated, walked away. While it wasn't a direct case of overt discrimination, it was a failure in customer service, rooted in hesitation and fear of addressing the customer's needs. Robert immediately approached the cashier and struck up a conversation. "Hey, I noticed you seemed unsure when that customer asked for help. What was going through your mind?" he asked, trying to gauge her thought process. The young woman, nervous, admitted that she wasn't sure how to handle the situation, particularly because the customer had asked for a specific product, and she didn't want to risk giving the wrong information. Robert, recognizing the opportunity for teaching, gently explained that part of good customer service was being proactive and not fearing the possibility of making a mistake. He reassured her that it was okay to admit when you didn't know something, but that offering help or showing initiative was always appreciated by customers. Later that day, Robert had a conversation with the store manager, Sam, a seasoned professional who had been with the company for several years. Sam acknowledged the issue and agreed that the cashier needed more confidence and training in dealing with difficult customer interactions. "We've been so focused on performance metrics and keeping the store running smoothly that we've overlooked the softer skills, things like empathy and problem solving," Sam admitted. Robert nodded in agreement, understanding that while operational success was important, customer service couldn't thrive without these essential human elements. The next day, Robert arranged for a one-on-one training session with the cashier and Sam. Together, they worked on developing strategies for managing customer interactions with greater confidence and empathy. Robert emphasized the importance of creating a safe space where customers felt comfortable asking questions and employees felt empowered to help, even if they didn't have all the answers. He made it clear that this kind of training would be rolled out across all stores to ensure that every employee could effectively represent the company's core values. After that visit, Robert left Phoenix feeling hopeful but aware that this was just another step in the larger journey of transformation. The road ahead was still long, but he was encouraged by the progress and the willingness of his employees to engage in the process. He knew that the changes wouldn't happen overnight, but with consistent effort, the company could shift its culture toward one of true inclusivity, respect, and care for every customer who walked through the doors. This wasn't just about fixing the surface problems, it was about building a foundation that would ensure the company remained true to its values for generations to come. As Robert continued his work, he understood now more than ever that leadership wasn't just about overseeing operations, it was about modeling the behavior he wanted to see in others, leading with empathy, and making sure his company's culture reflected the kind of society he wanted to help create. As Robert continued his efforts to overhaul the company's culture, he realized that the journey was not going to be an easy one. Each store he visited brought new insights, some encouraging, others sobering. But one thing was certain: the progress, while real, needed to be sustained. He had tackled the immediate issues: bias, neglect, and a lack of respect, but now he needed to address the deeper, systemic problems that had allowed these behaviors to take root in the first place. The changes had to be ingrained into the very fabric of the company, and it would require leadership at all levels to make this vision a reality. One particularly revealing moment came during his visit to a store in San Francisco. Robert had been observing the store's operations for several hours, interacting with employees and customers, and he had noticed a pattern: while most of the employees were friendly and attentive, there was still a clear divide in how people of different backgrounds were treated. Robert witnessed a situation where two customers, one white, the other Latino, approached the customer service desk at the same time. The white customer was greeted promptly and helped immediately, while the Latino customer was ignored for several minutes before being assisted. Robert, noticing this, felt a familiar pang of frustration. He had seen this kind of disparity before, but it still stung each time. It wasn't overt racism, but it was a clear example of how subtle biases could affect the way people were treated. Robert decided to address the issue head-on, but he knew this was going to be a delicate conversation. He approached the store manager, Angela, who had been managing the store for several years and was considered a strong leader within the company. "Angela," Robert began, his voice calm but direct, "I saw something today that I want to talk to you about." Angela looked up from her desk, her face slightly tense. She had worked hard to build rapport with her team, but she knew the company was under close scrutiny. "I noticed that one of your customers was ignored for several minutes while another was assisted right away," Robert continued. "It wasn't the kind of service we aim for." "What happened?" Angela, though initially taken aback, was quick to respond. "I'm not sure, Robert. I've been trying to ensure every customer is treated equally. Maybe there was a mix-up, but I'll look into it." Robert nodded. "I appreciate that, but we need to dig deeper. We can't allow these small oversights to go unnoticed. It's a cultural issue that needs to be addressed." After the conversation, Robert spent some time speaking with the employees, asking them to reflect on their actions and the unconscious biases they might hold. He reminded them that customer service was about more than just completing a transaction. It was about creating an inclusive environment where everyone felt welcome and valued. Robert also took the time to meet with Angela's leadership team to stress the importance of staying vigilant about these issues and making sure that all customers, no matter their race or background, received the same level of service. In the weeks that followed, Robert worked closely with Angela to implement new strategies for addressing bias, both in customer interactions and within the workplace itself. He knew that it wasn't just about training, it was about fostering a culture of accountability, where every employee felt responsible for creating an environment of inclusivity. This meant regular check-ins, ongoing workshops, and an open-door policy where employees could report concerns or challenges they were facing without fear of retribution. As Robert drove back to his office after his visit to San Francisco, he reflected on how far the company had come and how much more work lay ahead. The changes he was trying to implement were not going to happen overnight, but he was beginning to see the first signs of a cultural shift. Employees were starting to engage in difficult conversations about bias and respect, and customers were beginning to notice the difference in the service they were receiving. For the first time in a long while, Robert felt a sense of cautious optimism. His company was on the path to something better, and with every step, they were getting closer to the vision he had set out to achieve: a company built not just on profit, but on respect, fairness, and genuine care for every individual who walked through their doors. Despite the small victories Robert had experienced over the past few months, he knew that the true test of his company's transformation would come in the form of long-term consistency. It was easy to implement changes temporarily, but ensuring that those changes became embedded in the company's culture required ongoing effort. Robert had seen positive shifts in the stores he visited, and his leadership team was becoming more attuned to the cultural issues that had been overlooked for so long. However, he understood that the work was far from finished. One particularly challenging moment occurred when Robert visited a store in Miami. As soon as he stepped inside, he could feel the difference. The energy in the store was noticeably more relaxed, but not in a positive way. Employees were chatting idly with each other, and customers seemed to be largely ignored. Robert, trying not to jump to conclusions, decided to observe for a while before approaching anyone. He made his way to the aisles, noticing that several customers were waiting in line at the checkout, yet the staff was not in a hurry to assist them. Robert's heart sank. This wasn't a case of overt discrimination, but it was a blatant lack of attention to customer needs. After a few more minutes of observation, Robert decided to approach the store manager, Derek, who had been with the company for several years. Derek was a friendly, approachable man, but Robert had noticed that he often seemed more focused on keeping up with the store's daily tasks than on maintaining high standards of customer service. As he approached Derek, Robert could see the unease in his eyes. "Derek," Robert began, his tone even but firm, "I've been here for a little while, and I've noticed that customer service seems to be slipping. There are customers standing in line, employees chatting, and no one seems to be actively assisting anyone. What's going on?" Derek looked uncomfortable but nodded. "I see what you mean. It's just that things have been a bit slow today. I guess we got a little too relaxed," he admitted. Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that sometimes things can feel slow, but we can't afford to let our standards slip. We're a company that values every customer's time, no matter how busy or quiet it is." Robert spent the next hour talking with Derek about how the store had strayed from the company's mission of respect, service, and professionalism. He discussed the importance of leading by example and reminded Derek that as a manager, he set the tone for the rest of the team. Derek acknowledged the issue and promised to work harder on reinforcing the company's values with his staff. Later, Robert gathered the team together for an impromptu meeting. He reminded them of the company's core values, stressing that customer service was not just about completing transactions, but about creating a positive and welcoming environment for everyone who walked through the doors. He emphasized that every employee, regardless of their role, was responsible for ensuring that customers felt seen, heard, and respected. In the following weeks, Derek implemented regular meetings with his team to discuss their performance, customer service standards, and any challenges they were facing. He encouraged his employees to hold each other accountable and to always be aware of how their actions affected the overall store environment. Robert also returned to the store for follow-up visits, observing the improvements that were slowly taking shape. It wasn't perfect, but the positive shift was palpable. Robert knew that this wouldn't be the last time a store would struggle with maintaining the high standards he had set for his company, but he also knew that by taking the time to address these issues directly, he was setting a precedent for future accountability. His commitment to ensuring that the company operated with integrity, respect, and care was unwavering, and he would continue to lead by example, knowing that lasting change wasn't something that happened overnight. As Robert drove away from the Miami store, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. There would always be setbacks, but every challenge he faced only strengthened his resolve. He had learned that leadership was about more than just steering the ship. It was about fostering a culture where everyone, from top to bottom, took responsibility for creating a positive impact. And as he moved forward, Robert was more determined than ever to see his company succeed, not just in profits, but in creating a workplace where respect and inclusivity were truly lived every day. As the weeks turned into months, Robert's commitment to improving his company's culture began to pay off, but he knew the journey was far from over. The changes had begun to take root, but maintaining that momentum would require a constant reassessment of progress and a willingness to confront new challenges as they arose. Robert was increasingly aware that real change wasn't just about addressing the surface-level issues, it was about fostering an environment where employees felt empowered to take ownership of the company's values and lead with integrity, both in their professional roles and in their personal lives. One particular visit stood out to Robert as a sign of the lasting changes he hoped to see. He traveled to a store in Dallas, a bustling location known for its diversity. Robert had visited the store earlier in the year and had noted some challenges, particularly in terms of how employees engaged with customers from different backgrounds. There were signs of improvement, but the work wasn't done. This time, he walked in with a new mindset. Instead of simply observing from the sidelines, he wanted to engage with employees on a deeper level and see how the changes in training and leadership had been embraced by the team. Upon entering the store, Robert was immediately struck by the difference. The atmosphere was noticeably warmer. Employees greeted him with smiles, and he noticed several customers being assisted promptly and with genuine enthusiasm. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear that a shift had taken place. Robert approached the customer service desk and introduced himself to the employee behind the counter, a young woman named Sarah, who had recently been promoted after demonstrating excellent leadership skills during her time as a sales associate. "Sarah, I have to say, I'm impressed with what I'm seeing here today," Robert said, his tone sincere. "The energy in this store is different. It feels like everyone is engaged and ready to help. What's changed?" Sarah smiled, clearly proud of the progress her team had made. "We've been working hard to bring the changes you talked about into everything we do. We have daily huddles now where we talk about how we're treating customers and what we can do better. Everyone holds each other accountable, and we're more connected as a team than ever." Robert nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in his chest. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You all are making this happen, not just the management team, but everyone. That's how true change takes place." As Robert continued to walk through the store, engaging with more employees and customers, he felt a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the understanding that this shift was still fragile. While he was encouraged by the progress, he knew that there would always be setbacks, and it was essential to keep the lines of communication open. Later that day, Robert sat down with the store manager, George, to discuss the store's progress and any ongoing challenges. George, a longtime employee who had seen many changes over the years, was pleased with the improvements but also acknowledged that some old habits still lingered. "We've come a long way, Robert, but there are still some days when the team gets complacent, especially when things get busy. We need to remind them why we're doing this. It can't just be about hitting targets. It has to be about creating a culture of respect and inclusivity that's seen and felt every day." Robert agreed, knowing that complacency was one of the biggest threats to lasting change. "You're right, George. We can't stop now. We need to keep reinforcing these values. It's not just about the training, it's about how we show up every day as leaders and as employees." In the months following his visit, Robert continued to work closely with store managers and employees, ensuring that the company's values of respect, fairness, and inclusivity were consistently reinforced in every store. The road to transformation was long, but Robert's belief in the company's mission had only grown stronger. Every small step, every conversation, and every act of accountability brought the company closer to the vision he had for it, a company where respect wasn't just a policy, but a living, breathing part of its culture. As Robert looked out over the stores, he knew there was still much work to be done. But the changes he had started were no longer just hopeful ideas, they were becoming a reality. And with every employee who embraced the vision, every manager who led with integrity, and every customer who felt valued, Robert was more confident than ever that his company was on the right path. The road ahead was full of challenges, but with the dedication of his team and a continued commitment to accountability, Robert believed they could continue building something lasting, a company that truly stood for respect, fairness, and inclusion. The journey of Robert, the CEO, offers a powerful lesson on the importance of leadership, accountability, and continuous improvement. The key takeaway is that true change requires more than just words. It demands action, persistence, and a commitment to personal responsibility. As Robert worked to address the culture within his company, he realized that small changes could have a significant impact when they are rooted in respect and care for others. It's easy to become complacent and allow bad habits to persist, but the real challenge lies in confronting those habits, being open to feedback, and taking steps to create a positive, inclusive environment. This lesson can be applied to all aspects of life. Whether in our families, communities, or workplaces, we must remember that change starts with us. We all have the power to lead by example, showing kindness and respect to those around us. By consistently holding ourselves accountable and making small but meaningful adjustments, we can foster stronger, more connected relationships and contribute to a better world. The key is to never stop learning, growing, and improving, not just for ourselves, but for those we care about. If you were in Robert's shoes, would you have made the same bold decision to go undercover in your own company? What would you do if you discovered your team wasn't living up to your values? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you're enjoying the story and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales of leadership, accountability, and change. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life.